Good afternoon, welcome to the Midday Mull for Friday the 16th of October. We continue following Robert Murray McShane's readings, and we've ended Ezekiel and moved on to the book of Daniel, which in terms of scripture is the next book, but chronologically falls before Ezekiel, so we do a little leap back in history. And the book starts with the following. In the 3rd year of the reign of Jehoiakim, king of Judah, Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, came to Jerusalem and besieged it. And the Lord delivered Jehoiakim, king of Judah, into his hand, along with some of the articles of the temple of God. These he carried off to the temple of his God in Babylonia and put in the treasure house of his God. And as I read that, I wondered, what did the people make of that historical fact? At a time when gods were localized and nationalized, and any conflict between two nations was seen as a conflict between the gods, and the victorious nation was victorious because their God was better. And here Israel lost, and the city was besieged, the temple was ransacked, all the valuables were taken out, and the people would have seen the king and all the officials dragged off in chains to Babylon, and they were never seen again. At the time, it must have seemed like an unmitigated disaster. 2,500 years later, we look back and we can say, they were going into exile, which lasted 70 years. They came back from exile, and the salvation historical purposes of God continued. We can see that now. In those days, I doubt that they saw that. And as they faced that disaster, there's this little line, and the Lord delivered Jehoiakim, king of Judah, into his hand. The Lord did this. And for the writer, that means this wasn't that Marduk, the god of the Babylonians, was a stronger god. Yahweh, the God of Israel, was doing this. He was still in charge. And he was working out his purposes, despite the fact that it looked like a disaster. And we can respond to that in one of two ways. On the one hand, we can say, that's not a very nice God. I don't like a God that would send people into exile and have a city besieged and people killed and temples ransacked. That's not a nice God. Don't want that God. I want to have a nicer God, a sort of nice, soft, generous, fluffy, happy God, a little bit more like Father Christmas. Well, you have to make your own God then, but it's not the God of the Bible. If one takes this God, what it says to me is that in the midst of disaster, when things are going wrong, when it looks like our temple has been ransacked and everything valuable is gone, God can still be in control. It's not that God has left us, or God has lost control, or things have got away from him, or he's turned away. God is still there. He is still in charge. He's still working out his purposes in the situation and in our lives. And that's an encouragement. Now, my prayer is that we don't face this kind of besieging and ransacking, but what we want and what we get are sometimes different. And so we worship a God who is with us in every situation. When things are going well, as I pray they are, but we mustn't lose sight when things that are turned around and we do face struggles, God is still there, as much as, or possibly even more than he was with us in the good times. So if you're in the good times, give thanks to God for his blessings. If you're struggling, know that God is with you in that struggle, and find strength in that encouragement and hope. And know that you are blessed, because that is the God we serve.